Welcome back to the podcast. This is Don Doing Stuff. You're listening to the Cheatcoders podcast. We've got a very special segment on right now because there is a lot going on in the world. In regards to the Black Lives Movement, there's a lot going on here in Australia with the Indigenous deaths in custody movement that's been going on. And we've got some special guests with us who are here to help us talk about this issue and you know, talk about what we can do to help and what we can do from this point forward to help, you know, progress. So just a quick introduction. We've got Tina Zaman, who is a stand-up comedian and the producer, CEO of Tight 5 Comedy, which is a comedy production that promotes people of color here. She originally from America, but is now living here in Australia. Welcome, Tina Zaman. We've also got Dalara Williams, who is an Indigenous Australian, an actor and a writer based here in Sydney. Would like to welcome you both to the podcast.
And don't forget about Eski. We have Eski here.
And obviously, yes, a friend of the show, Eski Ian Eskandor, aka Tito Yan Yan.
I feel like I'm here so much that, you know, I'm just part of the
yeah, you are part of the furniture.
I appreciate it.
But yeah, I think I thought about how I was going to start this segment and how we were going to start talking about it. And it was really difficult, but obviously if you haven't been living under a rock, you would know what's been going on in America. And I think this is something that's been happening not just you know, this week or this month. This is something that's been happening for years. And the discrimination and the oppression against Black people in the United States has been such a prominent thing. And Tina, I know you can help me with the history of this. It's crazy. I was watching or rewatching sitcoms that I used to watch as a kid, something like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? And they touched on these social issues. There was an episode where Fresh Prince, like Will Smith and Carlton, were driving to, I think it was the Bahamas, or not Bahamas. They were driving to somewhere, and they got pulled over. Palm Springs, yeah, and they got pulled over by police. And the way that the scene played out was Will, Carlton was the ignorant one. He was like, "Oh, you know, the police are here to help us," and Will was the commentary of what Black people experience when it comes to dealing with police. He was like, he's gonna ask for your license. He's gonna tell you to get out of the car. They're gonna arrest us. And that was the commentary from that episode. And the episode, I was rewatching that episode and thinking, like, this is something that's been happening for years, for longer than just this month. And it made me really emotional rewatching that. And I know, Tina, you could say a lot more about the history of America and what's happened there.
I mean, I think that when we're talking about American history, U.S. history, we need to keep in mind that we're talking about 400 years of Black death. And we're Black deaths because slavery is an example of a total institution. So even though the modern form of it is prison, it's a situation in which there's a controlling authority inside the system that gets to decide everything that happens in that system. And that means that they have the power to cover up and sanction death.
Yeah.
And murder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things as well, even though slavery was abolished, and the date escapes me right now, but even though slavery was abolished,
1865.
Thank you, thanks, Tina. Yeah, and even though slavery was abolished, there's still systems in place that hinder Black people from, you know, building wealth and building, you know, lives. And it's crazy that that's something that still exists.
I think that, yeah, when we talk about Black deaths in the United States, we need to be conscious of the history of lynching, and what is happening now is just a continuation of lynching and modern day lynching, which back in the day of slavery, they were public, and there were photos taken and made into postcards. So, you know, and then now that slavery is supposedly abolished, so the 13th Amendment, which Ava DuVernay made a movie about, or a web series about, is the amendment to the Constitution that states that slavery is abolished unless somebody is a convicted criminal. So once they're a convicted criminal, you can have them not just make number plates, but do whatever you want. I mean, California firefighters are often prisoners, and they fight fires, and then when they come out of prison, they have a record, so they can't actually be firefighters outside of prison. So it's a total institution. Other examples of a total institution are mental hospitals and the police.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for a bit of context, a lynching is hanging someone.
A lynching can be any racially motivated killing.
Yep.
It is generally in the context of the United States reserved for Black people that are trying to escape slavery. I know. I think some people are gonna. Yeah, I think it's really. I just want to emphasize right now that, you know, I feel very lucky to be a creative at this moment, and you know, I don't know how many of you have been catching up with other creatives, but I think it's really important to take care of yourself. If you can get therapy, please do that. And this is a critical time where we're all exhausted and trying to analyze and feel and communicate, and people are. Sometimes some of our messages are unclear because we are so emotionally flooded. So just to, you know, I'm a creative that really believes in the power of taking care of our mental health, even though it's difficult to ask for help. Just want to give a shout out to Dawn for asking for help to getting this Zoom link, because that is the hardest thing to do when you're a producer, to ask for help, because usually you can do everything yourself.
Usually. Thanks, Tina. Yeah, I think we can all agree that there's so much, and there's so much information, and there's a lot of work that needs to happen. And obviously we're talking about what's been happening in the US, but we are also struggling with what's been happening here in Australia, with the, you know, Indigenous deaths in custody. And Dalara, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Do you want to give us a little bit of context with that?
Yeah, it's very similar to obviously what's happening in the US, but because Australia itself is such a new country, it was like officially a federation state in 1901. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the history of the treatment of Aboriginal people, we weren't included in the census, also considered as citizens, until 1967. And so these are all very new. So as Aboriginal people have only been considered citizens for 52 years.
Yeah.
And so this is not something that's happened hundreds of years ago. It's my grandmother was 18 when she was then considered in the census. And it is a whole thing of just being a sort of control of Indigenous lives. And just like the US, there are these institutions that are put in place. Aboriginal people only make up 2.8% of the population of Australia. The population of Australia is about 24 million.
Yeah.
And Aboriginal people occupy 30% of prisons. In Northern Territory, the juvenile detentions were 100% of Indigenous kids.
Yeah.
So it's not just starting new of institutionalizing Aboriginal people, it's starting at the age of 10, where being convicted of that and gone to juvenile detention. And so that's sort of starting off in a lot of, like I said, that was in Northern Territory. As a fight of death in custody in the march yesterday, there was a death in custody in WA that same day.
During the marches, during the protests?
So while we're protesting, there was a death in custody that happened in
WA.
Western Australia.
Yeah.
So there is this continuous fight and to have a voice, and it starts with learning the true history of Australia.
Yeah.
That I think that's a lot of one of the only things a lot of Aboriginal people are just wanting is for people to understand and learn what has happened in Australia, because it isn't taught in our school system.
Yeah. I think when I was growing up, it was very much that, Captain Cook discovered Australia, and the Indigenous people were here, and effectively they colonized the place, and they kind of glossed over what happened in between that. And that stuff is really important, that, the Aboriginal people are the true owners of this land, but then got taken away from them. The same as,
It's and it wasn't just by accident, it was military as well. So a lot of people sort of in that whole scheme of Australia being discovered were a place for the convicts. They were actually supposed to go to America, but America at the time was going through the revolution, and so the British Empire was going to lose a colony, which was the Americas, and so they had to find another place to put their convicts. So this is all planned out. They had to search for another place, and then came across Australia.
Yeah.
And what they've learned about colonizing the Americas, they then modified it to get to Australia. So Australia is the only country in the Commonwealth that doesn't have a treaty with their Indigenous people.
Yeah.
And you can see all the countries that are under the Commonwealth. Australia isn't one of them. And they learned that through previous places they conquered.
Yeah.
And that's just a simple rule of terra nullius. If you don't terra nullius, it sort of translates to land belonging to no one. And that's sort of what they came, and they used that to claim the land, to say that we didn't have the systems in place as sort of westernized cultures, such as agricultural farmlands, even though we had, but it's not, in their eyes, it wasn't.
Yeah. The Aboriginal people are the true owners, but then because they didn't recognize the same structure or the same laws or whatever in place here, they were like, well, we can take the land. And that's horrible.
It's horrible that the fact that this information is not really out there in terms of not really, because this is the first time I'm actually hearing about this, and the protests and talking about deaths in custody has been really, that's the first time I'm hearing about that too. It's how things have been really glossed over through the years in terms of the Aboriginal culture, and how they've been put to the side and really glossed over as a culture. It's really horrible to hear at this moment because of hearing all this for the first time. I'm just kind of trying to take it all in, and I'm really appreciative of you guys to really put that knowledge out there, because I've never in my whole life I've never really came across this information. So.
I think it's always been something that you sort of know of, but the information wasn't readily available, because you hear about this stuff, right? You hear it on the news all the time, and it just becomes sort of just, there it is. It's like it's become the norm when it shouldn't be. And the issue is lack of information. So just to bring up the point that Tina brought up with the 13th, the Netflix documentary. You've heard about slavery. You've heard about, police brutality. It almost becomes so normal, like school shootings. You just, another one. When it first happens, like, whoa, that's messed up. But then you start seeing it more and more. You kind of just like, oh, well, that's fucked up. That's just how it is over there. But with what's happening with the police brutality, because of the lack of information and just it happening again, I'm not like, I don't know if it's wrong to say this, but some people just sort of like, that's just fucked up and nothing happens from it. But then that documentary, I watched that yesterday because right after the protests here in London, straight, I was just triggered because the moment all this stuff was happening, it really got everyone to pay attention. And while you sort of know, like, I've known about this stuff and I thought, I'm on the right side of this because I care about it. Only with this happening and really watching that documentary on Netflix, I was like, no, this is fucked up. I can't just be not saying anything. You know what I mean? Like, it's not enough to just say, I care about it. If you really have a conscience, if you really look into it. And I think what Dalara is saying with Australia, like, it was such a new country. We know about hints of it. You see it on the news or you hear people talk about it. But I don't know if it's like until we get a Netflix documentary in Australia to actually cover it, because it's so well done. Like, it just has it there. Like, the information's out there if you really look for it. Yeah. But with like social media, with how things are put together, how information is accessed, I think there's somewhat of a turning point. There's a bit more of a, like, it's gaining traction, and yeah, I just wanted to share that. Like, that I really recommend that documentary, and I wish there was something like that, because what Dalara just mentioned there, I'm on the same boat as Raf. I'm like, we live in Australia and I don't fucking know this, you know? Yeah, I know of it, but not as deep as like that hour documentary I watched on Netflix. I was like, oh my fucking God, like, really? It's messed up.
I know that there is information out there. And Dalara, you can probably tell us, because I know that there are films.
Sort of documentary series on SBS called The First Australians.
Yeah.
It's about I don't know how many episodes, but what it takes you through the history of Aboriginal Australians from first contact, from 1788 through, and I think the last one is about Mabo, and we just had obviously a reconciliation week, which topped and tails. Mabo Day was just on the 3rd of this month. Which he, if you don't know about it, it is, he sort of claims native title. So the hardest thing for Aboriginal people to claim native title is that you have to prove a continuous cultural practice on that land. And it's hard because a lot of Aboriginal people got removed from their land and put on reservations. And so that was broken. And so you have to go to the courts. And so he went to the courts and fought to say that that land up in Torres Strait Islanders was traditionally his, passed down from his father.
Right, for the Indigenous.
But yeah, it's a great, they sort of simplify a lot. But the thing is, I understand that it is overwhelming, these types of conversations, but the conversations that need to happen.
Yeah.
And it's not, you're not going to learn it overnight. And like a lot of things I've learned, obviously being in the situation, but it's years and years of learning and being active. I'm sort of comparing it to people that want to go to the gym. You don't go once and then you get results the next day. It's just commitment through learning and educating yourself through documentaries, films, reading materials, across all that. But if you have such a high interest in it, it's gonna sink in more than when a lot of people don't want to hear it. It just sort of goes through one ear and out the other. You're gonna then find a lot more material associated with that.
I know that John Peel just got a documentary called Utopia. I think he's the one that did that one, but that's a really good documentary to watch. It's done by a white man. I think it'd be great. I mean, there's so many great Aboriginal creatives out there doing great stuff already. But that's a documentary that comes to mind.
Yeah. And I know that there are websites out there. When I was doing a bit of research, there's because you mentioned Reconciliation Week, reconciliation.org.au. And I'll get links from you guys of like what the best links are to do their research for our listeners, for both the Indigenous deaths in custody and also for Black Lives Matter. I wanted to talk a little bit about that because Nat's talked about that idea of us seeing it but then not really identifying with it, and then on the internet it talks a lot about privilege. Right. It's some of us are privileged enough not to have that relationship with the police. We're privileged enough not to see that stuff happen to us. And I think that needs to be talked about a little bit more because some people are just like, well, the police, my relationship with the police is, speaking personally, because I grew up out west. And also, the relationship that I had with the police was I thought that I was always doing something wrong. Like if I was pulled over by the police, I was automatically doing something wrong. That's my personal experience. Wasn't necessarily that, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is let's talk a little bit about privilege and why it's important for us to recognize that that some of us have the privilege to, based on our skin color. And I know that all of us here are people of color. But what are your viewpoints about privilege, and how do we kind of help other people to recognize that privilege? And how do we bring more awareness to it? How do we talk about this sort of thing?
I think that we are talking about it, and I think what Dalara said is really important about it's something that you do on occasion. All right, it's something that we talk about every day. It's something that we learn about every day, and the things that we need to unlearn, we commit to that every day for the rest of our lives. It's not just it's a lifestyle. There's nothing that. Reading about stuff and being interested and letting that interest grow into genuine research that is based in your commitment to doing your part. It's problematic to always use these terms like allyship. There are arguments that say that if somebody benefits from your oppression in the form of privilege, then they actually cannot be your ally. So you will never have the same interests. And, in American history, I can't remember the poet at the moment, but, this idea that a slave and a slave master will never have the same interest. So it's a question that we have to ask every day. And I appreciate the conversations. And I think it is really important to do our own research and let it be something that we're doing for ourselves and not for anybody else.
Yeah, 100%.
I like to add that point you made there. Do it for ourselves, not for anyone else. That's a really good point in a sense of, especially with social media pressure, especially with the movement, the posting, the black square, just sharing information. I try to see both sides of the coin. I get it as well. But at the same time, posting for the sake of posting, just for it's trendy, or just say, I've done my part. I've posted my square. It doesn't end there. It shouldn't end there. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And I think that's a big thing. And I think it's also on the flip side of the coin, it's easy to condemn people if they don't share anything. Because social media is so easy to it's broadcast to the world. At the very least, someone that's not posting anything, which was me at the start. At first, I was like, I feel it's such a serious thing. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. My first post was just the hashtag with a black square, but it really got me paying attention. But at the least, just reiterating what Tina's saying, it's learning. It's like you gotta like really start looking into it and start living it, like not just like a passing thing. This isn't just a media trend, like the new viral sensation, the new TikTok dance or whatever. It's like, guys, something's happening here. The world is telling you something. A lot of people are affected by this. You got to know where you stand, and everyone stands on different levels. Even us being Asian, like Filipino, I don't know, like yellow skinned people. I hope that's not racist, but anyway, you can say yellow Asian. Okay, I don't know anymore, but that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Get uncomfortable. Say it. Like, not say anything. Say it, and then get corrected by it. You know what I mean? I'm learning myself, and I think before, like I said, you see this stuff all the time. You see the black people getting sent to jail, and thinking it's enough. Like, oh, I empathize with that. Yeah, we're Asian. We feel racism on occasion too. But the truth is, it's like, we're privileged as well, in that sense that while we do get some sort of form of racism, I've never felt like I was gonna get fucking killed for driving like over the speed limit or just something ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing. I think if anything, people of color that may not be black, but like a bit more, like, it's more of a reason to speak out, because we do feel some form of racism. And I have a lot of white friends that I had a mate from on Instagram that just posted something, and sometimes just to send like a bit of encouragement to reiterate what they've done, I'm like, hey man, thanks for, like, I'm not black, but like, hey man, that's really cool that you're speaking out. And he honestly told me, like, I really didn't know what to say at this point. Like, the more and more I looked into it, it's just not even color anymore. It's just being human, like humanity. Like, if anything, me being white, I have more of a reason to fight this. This is my fight more than the black people. They're the ones getting done for it. Me being the privileged person, I have the power to do something about it. And I think that's really important. So like, yeah, that's
100%.
just one thing I've learned. It's like, it's the start, right, Tina? Like, it's a lifestyle change. The thing you mentioned about unlearning certain things that we used to think may not be that big of an issue, you got to put into place, start practicing it. Because, you know, like, we talk a lot of shit too, man. Filipinos, we talk a lot of shit. You know what I mean? Icebreaker. I just had to make it. I had to lighten it up, man. I was getting too deep.
There's so much tension and deepness in
There's
this
so much tension. I had to be like,
conversation.
yo, we talk a lot of shit too. You know, Asians can be racist too. like, because we cop racism, it's not an excuse to be racist. All I'm trying to say. I'm just saying.
I would just want to touch on that real quick as well. Like, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is an issue about racism, but it is like in the bigger sense of it, it's an issue about humanity. Like, how do we treat each other? We're all humans. We're all part of the same race, well, the human race, right?
I'm just surprised, or like, I'm just watching the world of how 2020 has became this coming together type of feel.
Yeah.
Like, you've seen protests happen. You've seen the way they protested before, whether it be a more passive way of doing it, or from Colin Kaepernick kneeling to other protests as well. But it seems like this protest that's happened this week or the past few weeks, it feels a bit different. It feels a bit more that awareness has been given out to the world. Like, I feel now I'm more interested in trying to figure out a way that I can help. Like, a lot more people are more aware of what's going on, especially in Australia with the Aboriginal community. Like, there's things that we are not aware of, or that is not general knowledge, that we have to dive deep into. And I feel this year is a bit different compared to like how it was in the past, because this has been going on for a long, long time. But I'm just curious to know anyone's thoughts on why this message has been sent across differently than anything other. Is it the rioting? Is it the way it's been presented, or like what's different about this year?
Does it feel different to you guys, Tina, Dalara? Does this?
I just to quickly kind of touch on some of the things that you guys touched on. I mean, speaking of privilege, you know, like, India is part of Asia, Philippines is close by, and the thing is that to varying degrees between Australia and the United States, or maybe the same degree, Asians of all colors, yellow and brown, racially profiled as white by the police. And so that's something that prevents us from truly being able to understand the terror that is enacted on Indigenous and Black communities, not just here and there, but around the world too. And, I think that the reason it's different now is because we've all been saying this shit for over 20, like for me, I've been saying it for 20 years and nobody listened when I came to Sydney and dared to say the word people of color. People fucking saw me as aggressive and a threat. And I think that now we've been messaging this stuff long enough that it's probably clearer. And I know that my messaging is clearer than when I was really enraged and traumatized in my 20s without being able to respond rather than react. And this is the perfect time for people to learn that not only are there varying levels of privilege, but white privilege cannot be lost. And white people in the United States and in Australia have a fear of losing ground and losing white privilege. But now they're seeing that, well, they're not going to have anyone's knee on. They can shoot up a Black church and they will not have anybody's knee on their neck. They will get taken to McDonald's for a snack.
Yeah. There was that person that killed someone, and they took him to Hungry Jack's or something. We shouldn't mention names because they're not paying us, but yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things like people think that, if we promote that Black Lives Matter, then that means that white people's lives don't matter. That's the mentality that they think, but that's not the case. That's not how it's been happening.
The real reason that that's happening is because the whiteness as a racial construct is built on the difference from Blackness. And that's what white femininity is. There's a lot tied in there. And the reason that that's the response is because if Blackness is given the right to live and the right to exist, then whiteness can't really continue to exist in the sense that we know it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think another thing too, just to add on why this protest might be like different, right? Like there's more, like I look in the crowds and it's mixed. Sometimes like I think the Sydney ones from pictures, a lot of Aussies as well, like white Australians as well. It's once again the education piece, but also visibility. Like you like how many people witnessed a Black man get murdered on camera? Before, like media is such a powerful weapon. Like pretty much it's been used. I don't know, I might sound like a fruity conspiracy theorist right now, but controlling the media can really have an effect. You've seen it back in, I don't know the years, but you know what I mean? Like they'll set an image. Like I think the slaves, they were portrayed as these criminals, as these animals, rapists or whatnot. You can flip the narrative so easy, but I think where we are now in terms of technology, connectivity of the world, like how global it is, it's not just isolated to a country. And the actual movement, Black Lives Matter, you can't pinpoint it on a group. It's a hashtag. There's no address. There's no physical address to be like, we're gonna, the white people are gonna target that, the racists, like we gotta shut them down. It's like, you can't fucking shut it down. It's a hashtag. It's everywhere. And everyone saw it. And now people that didn't realize there was an issue are like, whoa, okay. And it's only gonna, like, I'm hoping it grows from here. And I think that's what's giving it a lot more traction than it did before. Because before it'd just be something like in the news that you might hear about and it's gone the next day, on to the next topic.
And that's you're not a fruity conspiracy theorist at all. It is 100% true that these big
I believe that. I just say that
elites-
as just in case,
like,
but I do believe that.
It's true. These people, these elite do control the media, and they do want to push a certain narrative. And with the power of the internet, it's just just turned on its head. When I was at the protest on Tuesday, a lot of the speakers were talking about, I'm so grateful for the power of the internet, because if this Facebook event didn't push, then a bunch of you people probably wouldn't be here. So Yeah,
you can clearly see the difference. I went to the one yesterday in London. This is my first protest. Like this, seeing all this really hit me. I've never been to a protest. I never really saw the appeal, not the appeal, but you know what I mean. Like it's kind of just like, yeah, I can support from afar if I at least acknowledge it. That was the mentality before. But with all this happening, I was inclined. I gotta go. I gotta check it out. And being there, just seeing. Like you just felt like you're really part of something. Like you feel empowered almost. I'm not black, but I feel like, you know what, just showing that I'm here to support speaks volumes in that sense as well. Sorry, there's a train. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Keep going.
It sounds like someone's flushing a toilet.
I'm sorry. I gotta fix this, man. It's the worst. My podcast has like train sounds all the time. But I was gonna say, sorry, once again with that point that I'm trying to say, like the difference with that me being there firsthand, I already know, I'm seeing it. I'm like, this is beautiful. People chanting, people of so many different colors. It wasn't just all black. If anything, I think there was more different random races as well together, holding up signs. That's beautiful. I like this was better than any music festival where I just get drunk and just party up. I like this more. I was like, this feels like we're actually doing something. And then just today, a day after the protest, you don't see shit about the good stuff. Like you see a bit of it because that doesn't sell. That doesn't get attention. You won't see a headline, oh, such a peaceful protest. London was so nice and happy. No, they show the one incident where like some dude it's inevitable, it's gonna happen, opportunist, some guy that chucks a bike at a horse, only in London. I don't know why. Chucks a bike at a horse. That's the front page. Yeah. And then they're showing all the bullshit that's happening. I'm like, I didn't see that. But like, yeah, that's bound to happen. Shit like that's gonna happen. And it's the same shit that happens in America. I'm very sure. Like I have a friend in New York and, you know, she is saying like it is pretty messed up, but they're gonna like exaggerate the bad shit depending on the media that uses it. Yeah. And our social media is like sort of challenging that. Well, the people with on the right side of it, basically, it can expose it for what it is. And yeah, that's it. It's just the comparisons, completely different from being there as opposed to what you see on the news. Because I already know a lot of my aunties and uncles are going to be messaging me like, Nathan, why did you go? It's so dangerous. Why would you do that? You're putting yourself in danger. I'm like, it was not danger. It was more civilized than a rave or a music festival that I've been to. Yeah. To be completely honest with you. Was that like for you, SK, man? Like it looked like it was.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it. I love mobilizing.
Good, huh?
It's all fun and games until the police
starts. Yeah,
pepper spray everyone.
Dalara, does has the protest felt different to you? I mean, that was the question.
Obviously, this year it's a completely different year to any other because of the events of the first 6 months. Obviously, the fires. And then going into now the pandemic of COVID, and obviously now the Black Lives Matter movement. It is different. I feel like there are a lot of people wanting to learn now, especially in my circle of people that I've known for several years, especially in the acting world, people that I went to NIDA with. I've continuously put things up or out there over several years and it won't get a lot of buzz, but somehow now there's people liking or sharing my statuses that I know they've seen it, but it just didn't affect them as much, or they just did not know. Compared to now. And I think because of social media, if you look on every platform, there's somebody talking about it, and not just one person, multiple people are talking about it. So you can't really escape it. And I think that's what made it different, that you couldn't hide. If you were on Facebook, it's everywhere. If you went on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, it's everywhere. You just could not escape the topic. And I think that's the thing that nobody can turn a blind eye to this.
Yeah, they can't plead ignorance anymore.
Absolutely. No, it is absolutely everywhere.
I just want to, sorry.
Oh my God, yeah.
I was just going to say that, yes, the internet is amazing in being able to connect all of us, but let's just also, give credit where credit's due people of color-led media, that it's allowing all of us to be presenters and talking heads and be experts on stuff that we know that we're not allowed to be authorities on outside of certain contexts. And now, I mean, I've noticed the same thing. People have been trying to silence me for 4 decades, and now I'm starting to get pats on the back and, oh, we should have listened to you sooner, and maybe there is something to what maybe you're not paranoid like we thought, or disturbed. And the thing is that it's because those people of color in the media and doing their own things are refusing to stop agitating and making people uncomfortable, that are way too comfortable, and tell themselves stories that help them sleep at night.
100%.
Yeah.
Every time I look on Google and try to find some articles on what's happening, I'm clicking on NITV. I'm clicking on Koori Radio. I'm no longer clicking on like Channel 9 or 7 anymore, especially when it came to the protest that happened the other day.
Yeah.
Because when I read those articles, they're not reporting it right. They're not. I feel like they're not. And when I read the ones from NITV or the footage that they've got there, it's like, that's what I saw.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I saw. And definitely giving props to those media outlets that are pushing the right kind of news.
Yeah, absolutely.
100.
What I like about this, even though this is very, very, it's a very, very heavy topic. There's a lot of information to process, and we were talking about this earlier on, off camera, amongst us, the three of us, Nats, Raf, and I, were that despite all of the stuff that's been happening this year, all the craziness of the bushfires, the pandemic, and now this movement, it feels like it's the beginning of change. It feels like it's a beginning, or it feels like there's more movement towards good things happening, and that's what we were talking about earlier amongst us, and that makes me very, very hopeful, despite all of the things that have been happening this year. One of the things I wanted to talk about as well was obviously that there's this stuff that's happening, but and we know that protesting is one of the things that we can do to help bring more awareness and show our support for these movements, for the Black Lives Matter movement, and also for the Indigenous deaths in custody movement. Something really interesting that I saw in terms of the protests were, Nats, you were saying that the protests were peaceful, but then there have been times where in America mostly, the police have been doing what they do and have been inciting. There's riots been incited and all of these things. One interesting thing is people have been sharing ways to be safer or help each other in and amongst these protests. I know that Eski, you wrote on your arm, it was like it was like a number for free legal advice if you were arrested in the protests. I saw,
got a bit of it still there. It's like
hey, get it tattooed, bro.
I should get it tattooed as well.
But also there were the protests that have been happening in Hong Kong. They've been using umbrellas to defend against tear gas. They've been using traffic cones to kind of stop the spread of the tear gas. All of these things to help to make it safer for people to peacefully protest. Do you guys have any advice for people that are protesting? What would you say to people that are wanting to show their support, to have their feet on the ground out there? What advice would you give them to help protest?
I think for me it is always your intentions.
Yeah.
I think now there are some people that are there obviously wanting to find out what's going on down there, or to have a photo op. There's a lot of things. So really knowing what your intentions are and why you're going down there as support. I went down yesterday, and it's one of the first protests I've ever been down to. And I spoke to my grandmother about it, going, I think the same as Nathan, going, you don't know why or how it works, what protests are. But she was protesting back in the late 60s, early 70s for land rights. And the reason why she said she did it is because they didn't have control over media or had social media. So that was the only way their voices could be heard. So it's really knowing why people are down there and how they're using that space and to support those Black voices. Knowing why you're going down there in the first place, and how do you hold that space for Black bodies and Black voices from both here in Australia and over in America.
Somebody goes to a Black Lives Matter protest and is not Black and is not willing to kneel between the Black protesters and the cops, and they shouldn't go.
Or if they're just trying to get the next Insta hit and get 1,000 likes for the.
You might die. You might die for that hit. You know what I'm saying? Like, protests are real. This is not for tourism. I mean, that might be the first thing that brings somebody in, but honestly, it can get dangerous. I did not expect Sydney cops to do what they did yesterday, and so I'm not going to say surprised because that's ridiculous, but I've had a lot of really good positive interactions with Sydney cops, probably because I do profile as white. I am Asian. But the other thing is that it really seems like that was a hell of a training breach, because I've seen Sydney police de-escalate a lot of shit, and they knew how to de-escalate that. Why did they escalate it instead?
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, on the flip side, well, not really the flip side. I guess in a more not practical, sorry, I don't know what I'm saying. More so like, you have to go in, like, I know it sounds silly, but you kind of have to be prepared for the just unknown, because like Tina said, you just don't know what's going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know like how bad it is here in the UK. You're seeing stuff in America, like people breaking windows and stuff. I was a bit skeptical. I was like, oh shit. But part of me was like, I just want to check it out. I get energized from being around a lot of action and shit. But yeah, just be smart. That's the main thing. We're in a pandemic right now as well. Wear a mask at least. Go with the group if you can. We biked it. We rode a bike. We didn't bother using public transport. So we could just go at least park our bikes a bit, somewhat close to it. So if things just got out of hand, we could just have an easy escape. And just don't incite stupid shit, know your intention. What Dalara said, know your intention there. It's not a fucking party or whatever, even though there was the vibe, like I can't explain it, but the whole impact, I mean, like how I felt after, I'm like, I never felt this, because I've never been to a protest before. I had mixed feelings about it going in, like what's gonna happen. So yeah, have a game plan. If you have a group, go with like maybe 3-4 friends, maybe not too many, because you guys will definitely get split up, and just have a game plan. Take care of each other. We were like, all right, just stick together all the time, because never know what's gonna happen. And that's it.
I like what we were saying earlier about obviously the media, or any type of media can change the narrative to whatever they want it to be. And we are fortunate enough to have outlets out there like NITV and Korea Radio who tell it like it is. That they don't try to spin it in a different way. I wanted to bring up something that Tina, Tina, you're obviously really outspoken about all of this stuff. I wanted to celebrate something. You just got given a grant. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I've been a creative for a really long time, but always terrified of writing grants. I don't know, Dalara, do you write grants?
It is a skill within itself.
Yeah, it could be a full-time job just within itself, but it's something that, if you have a podcast or some other ongoing production, eventually you do have to ask for some money. It helps if you have expenses. So I think this is like the 7th or 8th grant that I've ever written. Never got a yes before. The cultural resilience grant funding was available a couple of months ago, and it amounted to $300,000 for the city of Sydney. So like $5,000 maximum for individuals, $20,000 for venues. And I applied because my comedy show has a film crew, so we create together and kind of putting ourselves in a group context around bringing our live show company to the screen and asking for money to be able to pay people and build a website and things like that. We got that granted, and it's double the maximum that was advertised as being the amount. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I love is that this now helps to. And you were saying it when you were messaging me, like you have a story. Our stories will be heard, and that gives you a platform. That helps that platform to tell the stories of people of color. I'm really, really excited about that.
That's dope, man.
Love
that
it.
deserves a clap.
That's so
y'all.
cool.
Yeah, that deserves a clap, y'all.
Just for you guys.
I love that.
I was waiting for that.
I would like to personally thank you guys for Dalara and Tina for providing the knowledge that you have, and for
100%.
being outspoken and being constantly and persistent in your message and spreading this awareness of what is going on and what is not really shown in public knowledge. Like, I'm one of those people who are just slowly trying to get my head around of what's going on. Like, I've heard stuff in the past and it's been on my mind, but I think this time is more so that I'm paying more attention, being more aware, and wanting to actually act upon it to become, a part of that change. So I do like to thank you guys for coming onto this show and really giving out these knowledge and points that people should be aware of.
Where can people find you, and where can people find your production?
Anyway, you can find me on Instagram, I guess. You search Dalara Williams. But I just wanted to just quickly thank you guys for being able to have these uncomfortable conversations, because it is uncomfortable. But to remember that Black and Indigenous people are forever in those uncomfortable spaces, especially in these societies. You go into a bank, you go into just any streets and stuff, we're forever in those uncomfortable spaces. But you need to break that ice before we go any further. And if you're scared, like Tina says, if you're not willing to go and step in front of people to think, then don't go there. But if you're willing to want to make this change and to go forth, it has to start with these conversations, and that's how we're just going to get forward.
Yeah, love it.
100%.
I want to just before we sign off, just say that I'm really honored to be part of this night's discussion, and feel really validated and seen and able to just feel like I'm doing something that will be lasting for the city of Sydney and everybody that really is out there trying to be better and trying to work as a community within our separated communities and building those bridges on a daily basis. And it's really great to be able to chat about, the relief around our little arts and activism company getting some support from the city of Sydney. I think that what it means for all of Australia is that all these comedians of color that have been kind of leaving out the details of their culture just to please white audiences are finally going to understand that that's not actually what any audience wants. even and especially white audiences. So we actually can increase our appeal just by being ourselves. And, we're at a place where if the fact that I articulated the exclusive and exclusionary nature of Sydney comedy, that actually created a solution that allowed the city of Sydney to just step in and write a check. So, there's something to be said about persistence, like you guys are saying, and also consistency, getting better at messaging, and being willing to explain what problems are out there so that when you kind of have a solution, all somebody else needs to do is step in and fill in a small gap, and you're ready to go.
Yeah.
Love it. I feel like I'm a better person after this conversation. I really do. I really do feel as if I am more knowledgeable. And it makes me feel good to know that this is new knowledge to me, and I could make a change somehow.
Yeah. I feel inspired by this conversation.
I'm personally feeling scared about the new things that I'm going to learn, and how that'll challenge the own things that I think and actions. But I think that's part of the process of learning.
It's part of the process.
Yeah.
Time to get uncomfortable.
100%.
But yeah, Tina, where can they find you and find Type 5 Comedy?
So I'm Tina Teacher on Instagram, but Type 5 Comedy Show is our handle for all of our production related stuff. We're currently, we've been doing this from the beginning, but, sharing the comedic response around the world to Black Lives Matter and other movements that seek to take direct action out of microaggressions and hate crimes. And then, all this COVID-related anti-Asian, anti-Chinese sentiment. We post all of that. Comedians are very vocal about, what side they're on. And, Priyanka Chopra just got blasted for selling bleaching cream and then posting Black Lives Matter, but we're going to throw shade at her for the rest of her life for that one.
What the fuck?
Yeah. So please do follow our pages, and look forward to inviting everyone to our new website sometime next year.
Oh yeah.
So
We're looking forward to seeing that content that you guys bring out. All the stories that you're going to be telling. And once again, we'll be putting lots of links of how you can help support and donate, and also some links on what you can do to read it up on what's happening with the Black Lives Matter movement, and also the Indigenous deaths in custody movement. Thank you again to all of our guests on this show, on this episode. Thank you for making us uncomfortable, but at the same time inspiring us to be better.
Okay. All right. Before we end, I just want to shout out to, or not even shout out, I would like to say rest in peace to everyone who's been affected by
George Floyd, David Duncan,
by all this, deaths regarding to racism and geared towards racism, and really hope that everyone is more aware of what's going on. Stop being, ignoring it. It's hard to ignore now. Yeah. Let's just try and make some change. Let's make 2020 a reason that all this stuff is happening, is that because we are expecting a change to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Once again, 2020
vision.
Once again, thank you very much to our guests, to Tina Zaman, to Dalara Williams, to Ian Eski and Eskandor. You've been listening to the Cheatcoders podcast. You can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and on all podcast streaming platforms, or just check us out at www.thecheatcoders.com. Thanks again for listening to the Cheatcoders podcast.